Had enough of the Hollywood remake and sequel conveyor belt? Here's a new original movie, made, written and set in my country of England. Let's talk about The Salt Path and why it's worth seeking out here on the Film Podcast. I've just seen The Salt Path, which is a teeny tiny British movie. Based on a novel. I mean, a lot of films are based on novels, but this one is based on a best-selling novel of the same name, and it's kind of a true story. But it's extremely hot in here, and I don't want to waste any time, and certainly don't want to perspire, so I think let's get on the road and let's talk about The Salt Path, because we've spent far too much time recently talking about extremely over-the-top, high-budget American blockbusters. So let's hit the road and talk about The Salt Path. You know, as always, the interesting thing about cinema is that you can see so many different types of stories. You can see so many different types of characters. You can see so many different types of things happening to people. You never know what you're going to get. I think that's the case. Well, that's not always the case, but in the case of a film like this, you're never really sure what you're going to get with it. And what I mean by that is, I mean that kind of independent spirit that this film was made. I mean, it was funded by the BBC, and it was also funded by Black Bear Productions. The BBC is responsible for a lot of stuff that isn't going to make a lot of money. You know, they're not commercial as such. But what they are is stories about people, and stories that show people in the best and the worst of times. I think The Salt Path is kind of doing that. It's kind of got that edge to it, but not that edge at the same time. There we are then. Guess it keeps the thing. Oh my god. We are in the daytime. It's daytime, everyone, which is really weird because normally we see films in the nighttime when, you know, all is quiet and all is calm. It's got that sereneness about it. When you come out of watching a movie in the nighttime, particularly when it's late and it's a weekday, then the world's got a different feel to it. So we're talking about The Salt Path, and The Salt Path is a very, very small independent film. And as I mentioned whilst we were back in the car park, it's funded by the BBC in part, and it's funded by Black Bear Productions. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the BBC part of it is a very important thing to talk about, because the BBC is responsible for a lot of productions that wouldn't normally get financed. They're responsible for producing, creating, making, finding stories and making films that, I mean, Hollywood studios wouldn't go near this with a barge pole. Absolutely no way. It's got a spirit of its own that I think is both interesting and I guess a little bit odd at the same time. The place where it came from, which is a novel based on a true story, written by the person that experienced it. It works because of that. The feeling this film gave me was a feeling of against all odds, but the odds are not, you know, the world ending or aliens coming and blowing stuff up or wars or anything like that. The odds are very personal and very small, with one small tiny family that becomes even smaller. It just focuses on two people essentially. Let's talk about our gut feelings about The Salt Path. It's got a kind of, I suppose you can say, television style to it, which is probably a little bit unfair, I suppose. Yeah, it doesn't feel grand and epic like you'd expect a movie to feel, but at the same time it kind of does as well. And it feels grand and epic because of where it's set. It feels that way because of the natural environment that it's set in. I think that anyone seeing this is going to appreciate that as much as anything else in this movie. Social realism has always been something that British movies have been associated with. If we think back to the early days of cinema, British cinema was always something that was about the real people. It didn't have the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, and it didn't have all the colours and the joie de vivre, if you want to call it that, of Hollywood. It had that realism, that grittiness. And I guess that's because of the class structure and the class system in the UK, particularly back when that social realism British cinema thing was happening. It was after the war, and people were poor. Poverty was quite bad. You know, looking at the state of this country and looking at the state of, I guess you could say, America as well, and maybe parts of mainland Europe too, the cost of living is massive now. It's just about manageable. And I mean just about manageable for a huge part of the population. And The Salt Path kind of taps into that. We're all living on the edge. All it takes is one bad decision, or all it takes is one bad ruling from a court, or all it takes is one big bill to come in, and we're fucked, basically. That's one of the points that this film is trying to get across. It's got that British cinema social realism aspect to it. If you think of a director like Ken Loach, for example, his movies are not completely different to this. And what I mean by that is he covers the social realism aspect, but it's a lot more gritty. But then, thinking about this film, it's also quite gritty as well. What happens to the characters? It's the worst thing that can happen. Aside from somebody passing away, everything that happens to them is the worst thing that can happen when you're in a society that requires money and jobs and an income, a steady income, an income that won't go away. And if you can't keep that up, then you're fucked. This has kind of got that, but it's not showing people who are down and outs, if you want to call it that. It's showing a normal middle class couple who are financially screwed, basically. And it shows that unravel really quickly, actually. I wasn't expecting it to be so fast in the way that it shows us them going from a state of having a beautiful place to live to having nowhere to live. No safety net, nothing. Everything's gone. The movie begins and it's kind of window boxed on screen, and I suppose it's done to create that claustrophobic feeling. That wide expanse of scenery that we should be seeing is kind of closed in, and maybe that's because of the emotions that everyone's feeling in the film at that point. There comes a part in the movie when the aspect ratio opens up to full-on widescreen, and it looks great. I mean, you really notice it happen. It kind of brings that entire coastline to life. And I think that's what this film does, actually. It brings the place where it's set, which is a real place. It's the southwest coast. That part of this country is beautiful. It's one of the most stunning places in this whole collection of islands that we live on. And it's shown in its full gorgeousness throughout the entire length of this film. So I think that this movie is worth seeking out. It's got something about it that I thought was heartwarming but heart-wrenching at the same time. I guess that's solely 100% down to the main two characters. Well, we've got Gillian Anderson and we've got Jason Isaacs. Hello to Jason Isaacs. So, I've just seen it and I've just experienced it. So it's very raw in the mind at the moment, as always on this channel. At first, I was kind of like, you really need to pull this out the bag here. You really need to impress me. I've just come out of Mission Impossible 8, which has got people hanging off planes and big submarine-y stuff and loads of fight scenes and everything else like that. Probably 1 minute of screen time of Mission Impossible 8 costs the same amount as this entire film. That's not as long as Mission Impossible 8. It doesn't need to be as long as Mission Impossible 8. Mission Impossible 8 doesn't need to be as long as Mission Impossible 8. It's directed by Marianne Elliott. It's based on the book The Salt Path by Raina Winn. I don't read. It's not that I can't read, but I don't read. Going into this completely, blind, I guess. I didn't even watch a trailer for this. I didn't know anything about this film until I went in to see it. Essentially, you've got the main characters. It focuses on them almost solely. Raina Winn is played by Gillian Anderson. Raina Winn is the author of the book, The Salt Path. Essentially, this is her thing. So, finding an actress that could play her can't have been an easy task. But I guess it was made easier because, as far as I know, Gillian Anderson read this story and she herself decided that, look, this has moved me so much, I want to just go and make this film. It's a big release here in the UK. It's showing at all the major multiplexes everywhere. And, the place where I've just seen it was pretty busy. I mean, it was pretty busy. People going to see Lilo and Stitch, people going to see Mission Impossible 8, and people going to see The Salt Path. How about that? So Jason Isaacs plays Moth Winn, who is Raina Winn's husband. And what's happened to them both is, they kind of live in this farm. It's gorgeous. And we see it in the flashback parts of the story. And those flashback parts of the story are kind of mixed in with parts of the stuff that's happening now, i.e. them trekking around the southwest coast of the UK, just looking for somewhere to stay. Or staying anywhere, in fact. It's not a case of looking for somewhere to stay, B&Bs, hotels, whatever. It's actually, they've got rucksacks on the back with everything they own. They've got a tent, they've got all the tiny things that you need to survive in the wilderness, if you will. And that's it. They don't have anything else. The flashbacks happen in between the sort of going from one place to another along the south coast. And the flashbacks give us an insight into what happened and why they are in this situation that they're in. In the movie, it's not 100% clear exactly what happened. It doesn't go into full-on detail about all of that, but you just kind of get the gist anyway. They've lost everything that they own. So the farm and everything else in it has been repossessed. It's been taken away. The courts have issued an order to, take it all away. They're essentially evicted from their own home, and they've got nothing. There's a point in this film when it won me over. The two main characters, up until that point, I didn't really understand who they were as people. I didn't kind of get it, really. It's about the time when we learn of Moth's illness. Moth's got an illness, right? It's an illness that's kind of, it gets progressively worse and worse, and he gets diagnosed with that. And again, that's one of the flashbacks that we see. That's all I'm saying about that. The story from that point on, it did win me over. It had me kind of engrossed in it, really. This is a good mixture between that social realism aspect, and it's also a good mixture between dramatic storytelling and epic cinematography. The balance is really well done. That's what I found great about it, was the balance. And again, I don't think this would have worked if it wasn't for the awesome acting capabilities of Gillian Anderson and Jason Isaacs. They do elevate this film to another level. I did find myself wondering where exactly Gillian Anderson's accent is from. Because it's based on a real person, maybe that's how she talks anyway. Raina Wynn herself, the creator of the story, the writer of the original story, the person that experienced the whole thing for real, she kind of didn't understand how Gillian Anderson, a glitzy, glamorous Hollywood movie star, could play a gritty, sort of down-to-earth, real person like her. But I think that Gillian Anderson absolutely steals the show here. She does steal the show. In terms of trying to encompass a character and look as realistic as possible, but not act in that sort of weird, realistic way. This is a narrative film. It's not real. So if you play realism too real, it ends up looking extremely wooden on screen. But I suppose it happens when you get real people that aren't actors, playing parts in films. You can kind of tell a little bit. There are exceptions to that rule, of course, but you can kind of tell a little bit. But the fact that Gillian Anderson looks so rugged and so real in this movie, there's no glitz and glamour going on here whatsoever. It's as raw as it can be. It's the same with Jason Isaacs. He's exactly the same in this film. He's raw and rough and ready and real as they can be in a narrative structured movie. They play it perfectly. And you really feel that isolation with those two characters. You really feel the isolation and the fact that the whole world is seemingly against them just because they have no money and they have nowhere to stay. The fact that they are, as described by Raina herself, an ordinary girl from Melton Mowbray, that they ended up in this situation with nothing because they've got nothing left. All right, for those people who do live in the UK, like me, I'm not that familiar with the South Coast. It kind of takes place in that area of the Southwest, which is Somerset, Devon, Cornwall, and Dorset. And it is as beautiful as it looks in this movie. The path that they walk, it goes from Minehead to Poole. All the little towns and villages along the coast are just amazing. One of the most gorgeous places you can go to be honest. All right, let's carry on our way back home. It's getting hot in here because it is extremely hot today. It's 23 degrees. So those of you who don't think the UK can be warm, yes, it can. I do understand there's a lot of countries out there, probably the country you're watching this in right now, and you're thinking 23 degrees? Ha! That's a freezing cold day round here. It's directed by Marianne Phoebe Elliott. She's basically a theatre director. She comes from a theatre background. I'm not sure how she ended up directing this movie, but she has done a great job. She's managed to put together a story that doesn't feel, it doesn't feel theatre-y. It's definitely not stagey. It's grounded in the place where it's set. It's grounded with its characters and it's grounded in its reality. this would probably work great as a play, as a play in a theatre on stage. But it works really well as a movie, and it works really well as a story that's been told visually, on the big screen. Let's sum up The Salt Path. The Salt Path is an independent, teeny tiny British film that's got a big heart and a big soul. It features two exceptional actors, Gillian Anderson and Jason Isaacs. They steal the show here. And essentially, it's good that they do, because they're kind of the only people in it. There's a few incidental characters here and there, but it revolves solely around them and their story and what they've gone through and what they go through. And the thing that they go through is a stark reminder that unless you're extremely rich, unless you're extremely well off and comfortable, that something like this can happen to any of us at any time. And it kind of brings that situation to life, because the two characters are regular people. They're not down and outs, they're not addicts, they're none of those things. They're just regular people that have a regular life. But they fall on hard times, situations conspire against them, and they lose everything. It's a phenomenal story, and it's a true story. And it's a story that is worth seeing on the big screen. So The Salt Path is available everywhere in the UK. It's a gorgeous production. It's a British production, and I loved it. This is the Film Podcast. Join me next time, and I'll see you again soon. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you want.